When the crisis arrives, it does not knock on the door politely. She invades the room, knocks over the chairs, and turns on the television at full volume. The headlines scream, collapse, historical loss, the market has panicked. People look at each other desperate. They sell everything. They run to withdraw money. They look for predictions, gurus, shortcuts. And in that moment, I stay quiet. I don't get up. I don't run. I don't scream. Because I learned after many decades in this game that collective panic is the moment when a real investor starts to see. It's when emotional fog covers everything that clarity becomes an advantage. Have you ever been in a theater when someone shouts fire? People don't run to see if there is smoke. They just run. That financial market is the same. All it takes is a headline, a sudden drop, a rumor, and everyone starts running, not out of conviction, but out of fear of being the last to leave. But look, I'm not young anymore. I've seen crises more times than I can count. I've seen oil plummet. I've seen companies that seem eternal turn to dust. I've seen wars, bubbles, pandemics, bank collapses, hyperinflation, booms and busts. And yet the American economy and the world has always recovered. That's why I say, be greedy when others are afraid. It's not a nice phrase to put on the wall. It's the philosophy of life, because when everyone sells, prices drop more than they should, and that's where the big deals appear. But I understand, you look at your account, see the value drop and think I'm losing everything. And that's where most people make the fatal mistake, selling what has value because others are afraid. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. The market is like an auction where the majority shout for price, not value. And if you know what you're buying, if you understand the business, so if you are confident in what you are doing, so the crisis is not the end. It's the beginning of something extraordinary. I don't get excited anymore when stocks go up. I get excited when they fall, because I know I'm buying pieces of companies. And if those companies are good, the price is just a temporary distraction. If you're just starting out, maybe with little money, maybe scared by what you see, know one thing, you are already ahead of a lot of people just because you are seeking clarity in the midst of chaos. Because while others are running around trying to predict the future, I sit with a small smile looking at the opportunities that arise when the world loses its mind. Now understand, this doesn't mean you'll always get it right. I've already made a mistake. I've already missed obvious opportunities out of an abundance of caution, but I never lost money because I bought a good business based on fundamentals. You only need to get it right a few times in your life for it to make all the difference. But to get it right, you need to stop looking at the market as a lottery and start seeing companies for what they really are. Living organisms with real people selling real products to real customers. When you understand this, the game changes. You stop being one of the herd and become someone with clarity, calm, and a long-term vision. And believe me, this makes all the difference when the market panics. Remember, the market is volatile. He changes his mood all the time, but the value of a good business changes much more slowly. And that's why when prices fall, if you understand what you were buying, you don't panic, you smile. That's why I like crises, not because they want other people suffering, but because they reveal who knows what they are doing and who is just following the herd during euphoric phases. It is difficult to find bargains. Everyone is optimistic. Everyone thinks they have discovered the secret to success. This is when bubbles appear. Everyone wants to buy because it only goes up. But when the party ends, and it always does, those who are prepared have the chance to make game-changing moves. If you ask me what an investor's greatest skill is, it's not above average intelligence. It is not privileged access to information. It's the ability to stay calm when the world is screaming, being rational in the midst of the irrational, having clarity when the crowd only sees smoke, having courage when the ground seems to collapse. This is when you plant the seeds that will only bloom years later. And that's also why keeping cash in hand is so important, not to predict crises, but to take advantage of them. As I usually say, the market is a mechanism for transferring wealth from the impatient to the patient. The difference between those who lose and those who win is not in the crisis itself, but in the way each person reacts to it. So when others are afraid, when the assets are in liquidation, when the headlines talk about the end of capitalism, I will not be selling. I will be analyzing, comparing, reflecting, and if I find value, I'll be buying. Because in this game, the biggest profits don't come when everything is calm. They come when you are able to keep your head on straight while everyone else loses theirs. There's one thing I've learned over more than 7 decades of watching the markets. It's this: crises are not monsters. They are mirrors. They reveal who is naked when the tide goes out. Every economic cycle has its ups and downs. It's the nature of the system. There are moments of exaggerated enthusiasm and moments of paralyzing pessimism. But how you react to these moments says more about your future success than any other variable, and I can guarantee you, collective fear is a blessing for those who think clearly. See, I'm not immune to emotions. I feel the same butterflies in my stomach that anyone feels when they see markets plummet. But the difference is that over time, I learned not to let this cold decide for me. I learned not to sell when I'm scared. I learned that in the darkest moments, the best decisions you can make are hidden. Throughout my career, the greatest opportunities appeared when the world was in panic. It was like that in 1973. When almost no one cared about stocks. It was like this in 1987 when the market fell more than 20% in a single day. It was like this in 2008 in the midst of the global financial collapse. And it will be like this in the next crisis, whatever it may be, because the principles, they don't change. Solid companies continue to create value. People continue to buy products and services. The world keeps turning even when the market is falling. The problem is that most people forget this when they see red on the screen, act as if the market were a thermometer of reality. But the market is actually a gauge of emotions in the short term and a machine for weighing value in the long term. That's why I don't depend on the forecast. I depend on preparation. Many people think that investing well is predicting what will happen, but I was never interested in predictions. I've never found it useful to try to guess the Fed's next move, the next election, the next geopolitical conflict. What interests me is what doesn't change: human behavior, business logic, the power of compound interest, the value of patience. These are the anchors that keep me steady when everything seems to sink. And if I could leave you with one idea, just one idea, that would be this: the crisis is the time when the game changes hands. This is when the impatient hand over valuable assets to patience. That's when speculators run out and investors come in silently. This is when the crowd sells out of desperation, and those who are prepared buy out of conviction. And no, you don't have to be a billionaire to do this. You need 3 things: enough knowledge to understand what you are buying, temperament not to act based on fear, and time, the only ingredient that turns simple decisions into extraordinary results. I like to think of markets as a big scale. On the one hand, the noise, the panic, the headlines. On the other, reason, value, patience. Who wins? The answer is clear. Over time, a lot of people think that success comes from finding the next big thing. But deep down, it comes from avoid big mistakes. And acting on impulse in times of crisis is the biggest mistake you can make. That's why I don't run away from the crisis. I don't see her as a threat. I see it as an opportunity. Because in a world where everyone is shouting, those who whisper clearly have an advantage. And this advantage for me is not just about money. It's peaceful. In the freedom of not needing to act like everyone else. In the peace of knowing that you are doing what is right, even if others don't understand. So when the next crisis hits, and it will, remember this: crises don't scare me. They give me an advantage. Because while many run after certainties, I run after principles. And principles do not enter into crisis.